This is Paul Nobles from eatperform.com. I am sitting here with April Blackford. April, if you want to say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
So, our fat loss challenge has kind of started. People still have 3 days to get us all their information, but we've already had winners, and we posted those in the forums, which was kind of cool. And it seemed like people responded to that pretty well. Um, I know you and I had talked about cutting. Have you started that at this point, or are you
I
waiting for
actually
the?
have by default, because I've been so busy. I've been so busy with work and client calls and stuff like that. I've actually had to default by cutting down one of my training days. So by default, I've only been training 4 days a week, and I've actually already noticed, a pretty substantial difference just in cutting one day of training, which basically before, I would have the five higher calorie, higher carb days, and then the two moderate days, and now I kind of have three moderate days. I have reduced my training days down by about 100 calories, but not much. Basically, my strategy is to take a little bit away and see the progress that I can make with that before I pull any more away.
So have you been checking the scale or anything like that, or have you seen any movement there?
I actually initially, just from dropping the one day, I initially saw like a 4 pound difference, which obviously is some level of inflammation and just from the higher carbs. But I haven't actually checked it this week yet. So, and I had mentioned before the webinar started, I did add in some cardio, but that's only because I have to train for a Spartan race because I was still a little leery of it. But I didn't die. It's the first time in 2 years. But I've been doing speed rope, and I've been doing rower, and I've been doing like lighter kettlebell swings to basically give me the energy expenditures without, I'm not going super heavy on those, and basically just kind of a 2 minute on, 1 minute of speed rope and rower, that type of thing. So, what about you?
Well, yeah, one of the things that's interesting about like Spartan Race or Tough Mudder or something of that nature is, I've done two Tough Mudders, and I think that uh, the strength component is really the thing that most people miss out on. So like if you're just a regular normal person, right, and you decide to go for the Tough Mudder, yeah, there is a certain amount of running that has to happen, but being able to lift yourself over the walls and carry logs and things like that, that's really what makes it fun. And so if you just focus on running, which I know for you as somebody who trains with strength normally, that probably won't be that big of a deal. Do you have any idea what your goals are? I mean, do you have any specific goals for your cutting?
Um, no, I'm actually not focused kind of on a number. I'm more focused by kind of abs because I am actually thinking because I started out around 137 and I'm kind of hanging out around 132, 133. And I actually think that I'll probably look a lot different around 125, 126 than 126, maybe if that low, than I did before at 122, 123.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're shooting for 125.
Yes.
And you kind of like what you described is pretty much what I think most people would consider like their vacation weight, right? Where you have like 3 or 4 extra pounds around the holidays, and then you do 1 or 2 days of kind of more responsible eating, and then you lose that 3 or 4 pounds. Is that close to correct?
Exactly.
So your normal weight is somewhere in the 132 to 133 range, and so you're cutting about 7 pounds.
Yes.
Okay, so that's virtually my exact scenario. Um, the difference being that I am 178 and going to 170. Um, I have done it for a week. I am tracking pretty diligently. I mean, what's the difference on your rest days compared to your workout days?
My rest days, I actually dropped them down about 200. So I'm averaging, and I kind of go by feel because there's some rest days where, I did more activity around the house and like I painted my downstairs bathroom and, just more neat activity. And I actually ended up eating like 2,000 calories that day. But generally, for the most part, I've been dropping around 1,800 on my rest days, which is about a 200 calorie drop that I normally hang out at because I normally hang out around 2,000, 2,100.
Yeah. Um, well, I've had, it seems like, well, first of all, I was not tracking previous to this cut, and so I pretty much guessed on where to start off at. And so, for those that don't know, I only WOD 1 day a week. I'm actually being a little bit more aggressive than you are, um, whereas my average is at 2,100, and I've had days where I've actually been a little bit lower in terms of trying to kind of get things stimulated and moving. But I am sitting at 176, so starting at 178 to 176. Now I did, I think I probably mentioned this in the last webinar. I was, kind of had that vacation weight of about 183, like when I came home was 183. Was able to cut back to the 178 pretty quickly. But, uh, you know, what I want people to hear in this scenario is that we're really looking at, 6 to 7 pounds. We're not looking at, I need to lose 30 pounds. And so what we try to teach people is to sort of bite off their goals in chunks. And the reason being is that you are ultimately more successful that way. You kind of set things up better. For instance, if I get to 170, I'll try to hang out at that 170. I actually cut down from 180 to 175 and then hung out there for about 6 months and then gained 7 pounds of muscle in that process. And so what we're teaching you with Eat to Perform and sort of how the approach works is you cut down moderately and then you spend 3 to 6 months building and then you cut down and until you kind of find that sweet spot of where you want to be. And what's interesting for those that don't know, so a lot of people do, and this is sort of redundant information, but I intentionally went up to the 181-pound weight class, and I actually was as high as 185 pounds at one point, sort of setting myself up for this exact scenario. So I have already cut down, to this level. I think the highest I saw on the scale was sort of 189, and it's pretty much gone as planned. The first 10 pounds were kind of easy. The second cut, I was kind of looking at 10, ended up stopping at 5. I'm pretty sure. What's interesting, the last time that I cut down to 175, I did it intuitively. I wasn't tracking. What's been nice about the tracking is that I'm able to, and I sort of found this with the intuitive thing, right? When I was eating intuitively, and I would have days that were kind of higher, where, like you were talking, carbs around your workouts and things of this nature. What I found is I was just better off sort of maintaining kind of this moderate level where I would have things that I could eat. Like even at 2,100 calories, I can find things to eat. Like I've had pizza this week. But for the most part, that's been it. I mean, pretty much, if I'm getting 2,100 calories, I'm trying to get in, lots of chicken. I think only one day, where I was trying to really hit my macros, I didn't. I have had some days where, I'll talk about later. I don't know how interesting it'll be to people, but I sort of the way that I do it is I like to have two bigger meals a day. And so there have been 2 days so far where I've kind of had one and a half meals because I knew I was going to have like the pizza day as an example. Um, no, the pizza day actually I think I was fine because that was 2,100 calories. I was able to fit it in pretty good. I actually think I might have gone over like 50 calories or something. Um, but I've had 2 days where I kind of had one and a half meals because I, wanted to have a bigger meal in the evening. Um, and so I had, something like oatmeal with protein during the day, and then my bigger meal in the evening.
For me,
Um,
for the most part, my strategy has just been kind of reducing. Like normally at night, I would generally have like, I don't know, three and a half cups of cereal. But now I'm only doing like one and a half, two, just kind
yeah.
of reducing. Right now at this point, I'm just kind of reducing a little bit of the serving sizes, that I normally would. Rather than the larger servings, I just have smaller servings. So I'm kind of taking more of a moderate, I'm just chipping away a little bit, seeing what I can milk out of it. And then, if I need to take away more, then I will.
Which I think is a good strategy, and I think if you're just trying to lose 5 to 7 pounds, a lot of people will have success with that. As someone that you know has tried to get to 170 recently and struggled a little bit, I've decided to be a little bit more aggressive because I want to kind of hit my goals. Um, what's been interesting is that normally, I think a lot of people think this, and I'm no different than anybody else. Um, we all think we eat a lot more than we do, right? And so unless you're tracking, you don't really know. I will say this though, I was eating a lot more than 2,100 calories. Um, I as someone who doesn't CrossFit 6 days a week, who doesn't run, 5 miles a day and things of this nature, I think my calories probably would sit somewhere around 2,500, 26. So I probably am at that 25, 2,600 most days, and then I have the occasional 3,000 to a little bit higher days. So what I'm saying is 2,100 calories sucks. I mean, it's really noticeably different. You know, um, and I know that the first day or two, uh, I had to, uh, kind of watch my emotions and things like this. And my wife is doing it with me, and so we want to both be kind of cognizant of the fact that we could be a little cranky. How's Tom
Is it
feel?
cranky? Is it cranky or is it called hangry?
Yeah, well, what's interesting is that I haven't really been hungry all that much. Some of the days where I've, kind of delayed breakfast, as an example, um, I felt a little bit of hunger. But normally, what I find is on those days, especially on work days, I'm able to get a lot done, and then I'll have my meal, and that sort of helps. But what you realize is that all the little crutches that you have during the day, when you're eating normally and performing high and things of that nature, um, you miss those. I miss my dark chocolate macadamia nuts. I miss my Talenti at nighttime on occasion. I miss my, uh, actually, I've moved to coconut milk smoothies instead of the cereal. So that's been a little bit of an adjustment to me. Um, but
I think that's one thing that a lot of people kind of need to understand is like what you were saying, 2,100 calories, it can kind of get tough, and I think a lot of times you need to be creative, and I think a lot of our members, like on their lower days when their goals are fat loss, you're going to experience some hunger. That's just part of the process. No, you shouldn't be ravenous hungry, but there is some level of hunger. But generally, what I usually recommend is just getting creative with what you have, rather than, just like you could probably fit in the dark chocolate hazelnuts, but you're going to have to take it away somewhere else. Why would you kind of blow those calories there when you can have a larger meal.
Well, that's an interesting point. There's two things that what you find is when you're kind of a little sloppy, because what I'm basically using is the easiest diet ever format, from that article. And so we have, cooked a bunch of chicken, cooked a bunch of ground beef, and things of this nature. Well, what I found, like by the second day, is that if I can't keep my fats down, I'm in trouble, right? And so now for everybody out there to understand what we're talking about, fat's certainly not bad. We eat fat, but when I'm in one of these short cutting cycles, the first thing to go is fat. And the reason why the first thing to go is fat is because it's nutrient dense, and so you can add a lot of calories. So what we see a lot when somebody's coming from a paleo background, a lot of times they're under eating, but they're like, especially for the guys, they're usually overeating fat. I mean, by a lot. We've seen men with 200, 250 grams of fat. Well, that's 1,800 calories from fat alone. And you'd have to be a really big dude doing a lot of stuff, and eating that much fat is not going to be necessarily super favorable in terms of muscle protein turnover and things of that nature. And so fat is usually the first thing to go. And so I've had my fats as low as 50 on some of the days where I'm getting a little bit more aggressive. But I probably won't be going higher than 75 on virtually any day during the cycle, because it's just the easiest. It's the easiest way to kind of reduce calories. But even at 75 grams of fat, my carbs are pretty low on that day as well. Probably 150 to 200 grams. And so, that's something to keep in mind. We haven't really seen a lot of questions. We've got 34 people here. It does seem like we have a person raising their hand. Francesca, if you want to just go ahead and ask a question, ask away. But you don't need to raise your hand to get our attention. So hope that helps. And it looks like April actually...
I'm back.
I wonder if there's something that I can... No, I don't know. We've never actually done audio because it gets a little wonky with so many people. So, Francesca, if you want to just go ahead and ask a question in the chat box. But all that said, I've really only had 2 uncomfortable days at the most. And when I say uncomfortable, because the one thing that I think we sort of pride ourselves with each form, and we say it right on the front page, is that you can eat without, or you don't have to be hungry all the time. It doesn't mean you will never be hungry throughout the day at any single point, right? But if you said to somebody, hey, you're going to cut 7 pounds, 2 days of the week you're going to be uncomfortable for 7 weeks, and the rest of the time you can eat more freely, I think pretty much anybody's up for that. So we do have one question. Let's see. Are both you and April shooting for 1 pound per week of weight loss? I would say that that's about true for me. I can't speak for April. It sounds like she hasn't really been focusing on the scale so much this week, which I think is probably fair. And that's what I would suggest for a lot of you guys is the first week I would not be overly worried about, like I said, in my situation, I was not counting previous to that. I was on vacation in Cancun and eating pretty freely. And so, when I set my macros, pretty much I sort of set it, and I was a little concerned that I had set it too low, and I might, for instance, if I find that I wake up tomorrow morning and I'm 174, then I know that I'm too low, right? But I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think that what it'll probably be pretty gradual, and so from here on out, yeah, I mean, I'm basically looking at 6 more weeks at 170, and then once I'm at 170, then we'll just take 200, you know, 200 calories up per week until I get up to 3,000 again. The one thing that I am planning on doing is doing probably a hatch cycle, even though I was kind of telling April that, you know, I was trying to talk her out of it when she did it.
Well,
Um,
I loved it.
yeah,
Just loved it. It was awesome. There towards the end, towards the very end, I was getting, I increased my food several times over the course of it. But there towards the end, I was getting a little bit bored because I didn't really look ahead. I almost made it like a surprise. And like every week I'd look at the days or whatever. And there towards the end, it was a little anticlimactic for me, a little bit, because I thought it was really gonna like really bring some, some big stuff at the end, like in regards to the numbers. I would say probably the last 4 weeks I started adding in some max effort after my heavy working sets. I would do that, and I saw some good gains with that for the most part. But I wish I had have done the max effort sets from the very beginning, but I didn't.
right. Um, well, it's going to be interesting. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I do know that basically being 10 pounds lighter, everything will be a little bit easier in terms of pull-ups and things of that nature. In terms of strength, I'm hoping not to lose that much, but you never know. We'll see and address things as they go. Francesca's saying, been maintaining my weight at 2,020 calories high days and about 1,600 control days starting the challenge. Curious as to where you think calorie or macro wise I should be. She said she's been working with you, April, and it's been great. She's at 19.1% and wants to get to 15%. A lot of the times the secret to getting to 15% when you're 19% is sort of upping that work capacity and sort of keeping those macros up. That said, you could try to lower your overall strategy, as like when I was just talking about how I was adjusting my macros on various days. Essentially, what I was doing, it's an average. You're going to ultimately look at your average for the week. April, do you have any thoughts in terms of a strategy that she might use for this challenge?
Well, I think she's currently injured. She currently has a shoulder injury that she's kind of rehabbing. So, she's having to cut back on some of her training, which I do think that she could play to her advantage because the strategy that I took with her, because she wanted to make fat loss a focus, but she was still consistently training 5, 6 days a week. So we kind of met in the middle and did a compromise where I would let her do 5 days one week and then 4 days the next week and then 5 days, 4 days. So we kind of compromised there where she would take an extra rest day every other week. And she was actually making great progress in regards to that. I think she initially dropped down from 116 down to 108, 109 because she's small. She's very petite. I think she got down to like 109 and maintained that. And then, of course, the holidays came. I think she gained 2 pounds and then lost the 2 pounds, so she's back where she was. But I think she's rehabbing that shoulder. So.
I mean, would you have her go down to 1,800 to kind of lower her average,
Oh
or?
yeah, absolutely, because I think she's limited in regards to what she can do now in regards for training. So.
That's a good point, and that's what people need to hear with this is, normally if I was crossfitting more, my calories would be much closer to 3,000, but since I've reduced my volume, now my calories are more 25, 2,600. And so when you're injured, should you take out all your carbs? No, but you should reduce your overall calories. And so for someone who is, around 110 pounds, certainly 1,800 calories to get a little aggressive at this point in time I would not get much more aggressive than that, though, because when you're injured, you sort of need that um, in terms of recovery. One thing I have noticed, or at least I noticed in the beginning, was normally I sleep 8, 9 hours. I might get up one time during the night. Holy cow! All bets are off right now. The first night I only slept 6 hours, which like really pissed me off. I was like, screw this dieting shit. Um, and then the next 6 nights have been pretty good. But I am waking up more, just because the body's releasing a little bit more water and things of that nature. Normally, when you're having like those carbs before nighttime and things of that nature, you don't end up getting up and going out of bed. That's one thing that a lot of the low carb folks don't realize is that if you're sleeping less and getting up in the middle of the night, sometimes it's because your calories are too low.
I
For instance,
actually had one night where I had gotten really busy and I didn't have my cereal like I normally do before, even though I've reduced the serving size. And I got up like twice that night and still got up at 5 that morning, and I was just horrible that day. And then, of course, needless to say, since I've made it a point to have, even though it's a reduced serving size of cereal before I go to bed, I still make sure I save some calories and carbs for that. It's kind of nixed that problem. So.
I mean, like the smoothie that we drink before bed is like 325 calories, and so that does help, with the sleep. Um, but what was interesting about it, even though I slept 6 hours a day, I mean, and like I said, I normally sleep really well. Um, I wasn't tired. The one thing that I would suggest to people, especially in these scenarios where you're kind of cutting fat and maybe you normally sleep 8 hours, but you're waking up at 6.5, don't necessarily assume that you're going to be tired, right? In April's case, she was, a little cranky or whatever. Honestly, it did not seem to affect me. It felt like I was supposed to wake up after 6 hours sleep, and so, and I've experienced that in the past when, kind of cutting calories and things of that nature, where my sleep cycles get a little shorter, which I don't think is a positive. You should definitely want to stay there. You want to sleep a little bit more, but for 7 weeks, compared to the rest of my life, not that big a deal. Francesca is asking, should I drop fats? They're at 60 grams and believe we dropping carbs to 200 grams, protein 115 grams. I would definitely drop your fats to 50 grams. Is that what you would think as well?
I agree. Yes. Yes.
Um,
I would drop fats at 50 grams. I think she could probably get away with dropping carbs down to start with 175 and then work from there.
yeah.
Because
So
that's
okay,
basically essentially that's almost 200 calories right there.
yeah, for sure. Okay, so Lindsay's asking, I'm a new member, wondering if you weigh your food or do you mainly use MyFitnessPal or something similar? I do weigh my food and I use MyFitnessPal. I think most of us do that. Uh, do you have any thoughts? Because I mean, basically, what you do is you sort of weigh your food pre-cooked, and then you enter it into MyFitnessPal. The strategy that I'm taking and we're taking in my family is our meals aren't super exciting. They're kind of like one day last week I had 8 ounces of pretty lean ground beef, but obviously even lean ground beef isn't that lean, with mashed potatoes. And the ground beef wasn't seasoned. You know, the mashed potatoes was just like a Simply Potatoes brand or something of that nature. But we're kind of keeping it pretty simple. I mean, chicken and rice with a salad. Ground beef, steak, eggs. I think if we were to get too complicated, my wife is actually making like 2 or 3 recipes that are a little bit like tomorrow night we'll have chili as an example. Um, but in terms of like the recipes, that's I just think that the harder you make this, the harder it's going to be. So if you can kind of
I
keep
agree. It's just like the saying of keep it simple.
yeah, 90% of your meals are easy to make and convenient or actually already made. I mean, we haven't prepared this week's meals yet, but it's pretty easy to prepare these meals. Like, last week, I think I spent 30 minutes cooking up all my chicken for the week, um, and then, probably another, 15, 20 minutes cooking up all the ground beef. The issue with cooking things up that way is simply that you have to kind of keep it all measured out, and so instead of like cooking 3 pounds all at once, I took the approach of just like cooking 1 pound, each, and then putting them into the containers, and
Hey, you know that there is a way that you can measure it accurately when it's cooked. There is a formula to gauge and to measure your
well, it
protein when
seems
it's
like the
cooked.
formula is about 0.75. You know,
No, I'll send it to you, but there is a way, and that way you don't have to divide it up into to do that. But generally, I know what you're talking about because I will actually buy protein like lean turkey and stuff in larger quantities, and whenever I'm freezing it, I will actually freeze myself like 4 ounce bags or 5 ounce bags, and like little mini freezer bags, and then that way I pop it out. I don't have to weigh it. I already know, exactly how much it is, and it actually, if you're freezing it, it actually thaws out like in 5 minutes for only 5 ounces versus the large log of it. you
well,
know
most of the stuff we don't need to freeze because we're going to eat
yeah.
it within 3 days anyway. Um, but but yeah, I mean, I suppose if I cooked even bigger batches, then we could do that. One of the things that I think people like stress out about in these scenarios is sodium. Now, you know, I think one of the big issues that we see with a lot of people, right, especially when they're eating close to what their total daily energy expenditure is, that if your sodium's supposed to be around 2,000, 2,500, and you're eating close to your total daily energy expenditure, but your sodium's 5,000, then you'll see some bloating and things of this nature. But when you're eating, and you're supposed, you're at 2,600, but you're at 2,100 because you're kind of cutting a little bit. Honestly, sodium is so overrated. It's like this big honking deal. It's a much bigger deal when you're maintaining or kind of indulging. It's nowhere near as big a deal when your calories are roughly lower. Would you disagree with that? I mean, and I'm okay with you if you do.
I do disagree. I
Okay.
disagree, but I'm not one of those people who are, hard strong about the sodium. I think that if you consistently have higher sodium levels, if it's generally with men, I normally recommend 24, 2,800, 3,000, maybe tops for men. For women, 2,000, 24, 2,500. Like if mine is 26, 2,700, it's not a big deal. But if mine is averaging consistently 3,500, I have seen people who literally, I had a male who was carrying 14 pounds of water weight that he lost in 3 days because I made him cut his sodium back and made him increase his water.
I
Yeah,
mean, if you're eating like Chipotle for lunch and sausage for dinner, and you know what I mean, and you're at 4,500, 5,000, then certainly you're going to be a little bit bloated. But if mostly what you're eating is chicken, a little seasoning on your steak, things of that nature, it's really not going to be that big of a deal. I think men go much high. It's really kind of like, you hate to say this, but it's a cliche because it's true. um, Men tend to be less diligent about this stuff, and women tend to be too diligent about this stuff. And so you'll see women with sodium levels of 500 to 1,000, and actually their sodium levels should probably go up in those scenarios.
I
So
completely agree. And you'll see people trying to use the sodium-free Mrs. Dash, seasonings, which taste like complete crap. You know,
yeah,
I'm personally am a seasoner. I have to have some season to give it flavor, or
from
anything good.
from the South. So,
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, I mean, I just think that but Lindsay's initial question, once again, we're long-winded, is do we weigh our food? Yes. Do we MyFitnessPal? Yes. Um, for I may still count afterwards. One of the things that I think is hilarious is that people, as someone who does not count normally, it's just shocking to me that people whine about this shit. I mean, it's like unreal easy, especially with like the barcoding and stuff like that. I mean, I just don't get why people make such a honking deal of it, and especially when you're allowing yourself a decent amount of calories. It's sort of fun to play with what you can get away with and what you might have to push off into the next day or something like that. I just find it pretty easy. So um, I may still track afterwards. I'm not really sure. Normally, I just
I
kind of
I will believe it when I see it.
well, I normally eat pretty freely for a reason because I think the good majority of people that's the way that they want to eat, and I think I'm a good example that you can eat that way and do fine. But the one thing that I do that a lot of people that want to eat intuitively, they're like, well, I won't check the scale. If you don't check your scale, you don't really know where you're at, you know. And I'm not saying you need to check your scale every single day, but I do, you know. I mean, why wouldn't you want to know, you know? The problem that people run into, though, is they put this expectation on the scale, and that's where you sort of run into the problem, where they always want the scale to go lower, lower, lower. In the last 7 days, the scale's not been lower every single day. Um, but it has been sort of helpful to follow things and kind of see where things are at. Rebecca's asking, most of the references to rice are for white rice. Is there any issue with other types of rice, brown or yellow? Yellow would not be an issue as a general rule. Brown, it's not that brown rice is bad, okay? Brown rice has fiber. Fiber blunts insulin, and what we're trying to do is sort of get insulin to kind of do its job, and then go on its merry way. With brown rice, it sort of sticks around for a little while, and for somebody that's going to be eating vegetables a good majority of the time, brown rice isn't necessary. Now, a lot of people have thoughts on grains and brown rice sticking to your gut and all this other type of stuff. I think that's a little overdone if you only eat brown rice occasionally, if you only eat oats occasionally. If you're eating that type of stuff all the time, maybe it becomes an issue. Some of that's a little overblown. The science on that is kind of showing that maybe that's not that big of a deal. But if you are constantly eating rice and you're constantly eating mashed potatoes and you're constantly eating bread, and the problem isn't the bread, the rice, or the mashed potatoes, it's the calories that come along with them. And so as long as we're kind of keeping cognizant of all that, then you're fine. If, for instance, I'm at Chipotle and they're out of white rice, I would not hesitate to eat brown rice. Would I choose white rice? Yes. Would I choose yellow rice over brown rice? Yes. So I hope that's helpful in describing the hierarchy of the way that we sort of view starches. Ideally, we want them kind of clean and unencumbered. Anything you can add to that, April?
I pretty much agree. I think brown digests a little slower. I think on the days that your calorie standpoint's a little bit higher on your training days, I generally tend to recommend white rice on those days. The brown rice is going to tend to make you feel more full. It digests slower, so you likely would not be able to hit the amount of calories that you need. If you do prefer brown rice, I do generally recommend to keep that on your rest days because it's going to make you feel more full when your calories are overall lower.
I was going to say that earlier. The first couple days, I did not have salad, and I did get a little hungrier because of that. And then adding in the salads, um, I still had salad, but I wasn't as diligent of kind of having a handful of greens, and just having a handful of greens has sort of made the initial uncomfortable much more comfortable. And so that's also something to keep in mind if you're cutting. Not all of you are going to be cutting, and actually Suzanne's asking an interesting question. How long should one diet before the body starts seeing negative effects and begins to maintain body weight or even begin to gain? From that standpoint, should you slowly work up to your original TDE or get right back to it? Um, that is really highly dependent on the individual. Okay, but I can give you examples that I think might be helpful for you. If you are someone, let's say you're a female and you have 45% body fat. What you might find is you might see no real negative effects. Let's say that your normal calories when you were kind of eating, kind of poorly, right? So you're 45%, maybe you were eating poorly, that's why you're 45%. So, we get your calories to about 3,000 calories, you start to lose weight, you kind of stall out, and then you go down to 2,700 calories. Some of this, you might not see a negative effect for months, years, in some instances, depending on how much weight you have to lose, right? But that's not the case in most of the people that we talk to. What we talk to is usually we have people working about 10-week cycles, and then at that point we evaluate. But if, for instance, let's say that you cut down to 2,200 calories, and then you have to go to 1,800 calories to see another effect. The idea of going to 1,600 calories and then 1,200 calories, that's not something we think you should do. What we would think you to do is sort of the second part of your question, right? So you've seen results. Let's say that your total daily energy expenditure is 2,400. You went down to an average of, say, 1,800. You've lost 10 pounds in that scenario. So at that point, we would have you reset and then basically go up 200 calories per week. So in 3 weeks, you'd be back up to your 2,400. What's interesting, and the part that kind of a lot of people miss out on, is that your work capacity should be a lot higher when you lose 10 pounds. Pretty much everything gets easier. Strength, I mean, it sort of depends on how you view it. Some people say, well, you'll lose strength, and you'll almost certainly lose a little bit of strength because you're losing some leverage and things of that nature. But most people find that their strength is not dramatically affected one way or the other. Strength is sort of a funny thing, though. And it's one of the things that I think is sort of a kind of a myth within CrossFit, because people find themselves getting stronger overall. And so if you started and you were, kind of weak overall, and then, you started working out and getting stronger over two years, you would get naturally stronger. But what we typically see is right around that 2-year mark, if you want to really continue to get stronger, you're going to have to get more specific. You can't do it just with CrossFit at that point. And so I think a lot of people will see some progress from a strength perspective without being too specific, and then they'll go, well, I cut 10 pounds and then I got weak. Well, not really. It was really kind of the not focusing on specific strength training. And so if you start to focus on specific strength training at that point, you will see your strength go back, and usually your personal weight is not going to be that big of a factor. The two biggest things that come into play with overall strength is really your central nervous system and leverage. You will lose a little bit of leverage in your central nervous system, will typically respond well as long as you're not just constantly trying to lift for 1 rep maxes and you're doing more of a progressive linear programming and things of that nature. So I don't know if that helps you or not, Sue, but that's sort of the answer to your question on both sides. And we will head to Ramona's question. She's saying, yes, thank you. Would increasing workouts help or be detrimental during a cut? Well, that's interesting because what April talked about is sort of what we recommend to people. What we recommend to people is to cut out of season so you can actually decrease your workouts so you can get a little bit more aggressive with calories. And so if you normally work out 5 to 6 times a week, pulling it into 5 or 4 times a week for 7 to 8 weeks seems to me like a pretty good offset, if you're talking about fat loss as your goal. Let me just kind of explain, and we talk about this all the time, is when you try to work out a lot and you try to get fat loss, it's very hard to serve two masters in that instance. And so what we try to have people do is sort of pick. Are you trying to increase work capacity or are you trying to get fat loss, right? And so if you're trying to get fat loss, let's focus on that for a short period of time, and then let's get that done, whatever it takes, right? Not super aggressive, but certainly enough where you're seeing your goals happen. And so she's saying, thank you, makes sense. Okay, so Ramona, she's new to ETP, and she has 2 questions. How problematic is it if I'm getting a full 6 to 8 hours? I try to sleep late, but my body just wakes me up at the same time every day. Well, like I said earlier, sometimes we sort of get used to this 6 to 8 hours because we've not been eating an adequate amount of food for the things that we do. April's yawning all the time, so she's going to end up making me yawn. But what you'll find is once you start to get into Eat to Perform, the awesome little secret about Eat to Perform, especially when you start eating closer to your total daily energy expenditure, which, by the way, you should be doing the majority of the time. We're talking about cutting right now because of the fat loss challenge, but the majority of the time you should be trying to build lean tissue. And that's the other way to address fat loss that a lot of people don't focus on. But the dirty little, or the best kept secret about Eat to Perform is that people sleep a lot better on Eat to Perform, and magically, when you eat an appropriate amount of food for what you do, you sleep better. So would I be worried about it? No, I would not be worried about it. But I would sort of try to hone in on that food part and sort of keep an eye on it. April mentioned having some cereal before bed, carbs before bed, and usually that'll help you with some deep sleep. I did talk about this. One of the things that I'm doing this go around, because I do like to be active, and this might actually address what you were saying, Sue. It might be an answer for you as well. It certainly is for me. Is I like being active with my body. I like getting out and doing things. So instead of a workout day, even though this is kind of a workout, I do hot yoga, which is nowhere near as intense as some of my weightlifting sessions, but it's actually a lot harder for me because I'm not near as flexible as the good majority of people. There are things that I do really well in the class, though, like any squatting movement. I mean, and I'm not even a gifted squatter, but I can get a lot lower than a lot of people in this class. But hot yoga has been sort of a nice thing to add to where I could be active, but it's not something that is going to kind of wear me down, or at least I haven't seen that happening. This week I actually I ended up eating like 1,800 calories on that day. So and I felt perfectly fine doing so. It is something I want to keep an eye on though, because I'm doing Bikram or Bikram or whatever that is. And so it's like 105. So like I kind of load up the majority of my meals. That was actually one of the days. Like I said, it's kind of a bigger meal and a half day. But I made sure that I had my big meal beforehand, like around 6, and I do it at 7:30, and then I had afterwards. But my main point, Ramona, was to say to you is that holy cow, this hot yoga makes you sleep unreal good. So if this is an option for you guys, it might be something to consider, because I have to tell you guys, I sleep like a baby on those nights. I mean, like drooling on my pillow kind of sleep. So if it's an option, my wife has said that she feels the same way when she does regular yoga, which may be the case. It's just not something that I'm all that familiar with. She did have a second question. What is the smoothie you drink each night? If you go to Google and you type in Eat to Perform coconut milk smoothies, it'll show you. It's basically half a can of coconut milk light, a bag of dark cherries, and then some pineapples, and I split it with my wife. So overall, the recipe is like 650 calories. We split it, it's 325 calories. You could do half of it. The reason why we do it is because you get a lot. It's like a lot of volume. But you could do half and it'd still be a lot. So that would be something I would look at if you guys are new to Eat to Perform. A lot of old schooler Eat to Performers have been doing that recipe for a long period of time. Let's see. Okay, to finish, Ramona, she's saying, okay, cool, going to have to see if they have it in my area. Also, Ramona, as a new person, you definitely want to make sure to get in the forums and kind of, keep exploring that, because that's going to be a big help to your journey. Teddy, who followed up his earlier question, when I hear increased work capacity, I think right away of things like conditioning work, adding in more sets or exercise to routine and cardio activity. Am I correct in thinking of it like that? Yes, you are correct in thinking of it like that, but let me give you another example of how it might seem like cardio, but it really isn't. When I do, like, for most people who don't know, I do like a hybrid training, and I've been doing it for about the last 6 months, and I've been really specific in the last 3 months. I have 2 days where I do slow circuits, and so to give you an example, Teddy, let's say I was doing like ring dips, and I normally do 5, and then I go to 170 pounds. I could probably easily do 8. So I just moved my sets from 5 to 8, and so I've increased work capacity. So if I moved to 8, I was normally doing, let's say, 6 to 8 rounds slowly, and I still do those 6 to 8 rounds, but I'm doing 8 ring dips rather than 5 ring dips. I've increased my work capacity. So that's what I mean. So it doesn't necessarily always equate to just cardio. Or does simply getting stronger over time fall under the category as well? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, did you really get stronger if you lost 10 pounds and then, and go from 5 to 8? I don't know that you did. But in general, I am always trying to push those numbers, and even if the numbers themselves, if I'm not moving from 5 reps to 8, you can also increase in rounds, which is another good reason why people should track some of this stuff. I'm not always great at that, though. I being 5-6 years into this, and some people will say, well, this is an excuse, but I have to say, if I'm not feeling 100%, I'm not going to push it just because there's a thing on a sheet of paper that says 6 rounds. I'm going to go in, I'm going to get a good workout, and I'm going to leave. You know, I'm not in this to kill myself. You know, I'm in this to be better and more capable. And I
I
found
totally
that,
agree. I totally agree. I get a lot of slack all the time when I go to the gym weekly, and on deadlift days, all the guys from the gym, they're like, "Oh, you maxing out today?" I'm like, "Dude, I just maxed out like 2 weeks ago. I'm not maxing out every week. That's just dumb." And they're like, "Oh, why not? Why not? You should go for a max." That's just what it's all about. Just constantly trying to max out, and they don't really understand, kind of the focus of the progressive strength. It's all about,
yeah.
maxing out and trying to throw as much weight as you possibly can with horrible form.
But when I deadlifted 475, that week was the only week that I had tested anything over, I think it was 415. Um, and so I tested 435 and 455, I believe. Um, but it's sort of funny when you think, here's somebody who's deadlifted 475 pounds, but he didn't even know that he had that into the tank. Why? Because I was just training. Now, had I picked up more than 475 pounds, sure, I'd picked it up with trap bar. I picked it up with block pulls. So I had some clue that I was a little bit stronger than just 425. But I think way too many people do what you're talking about, April, is they're constantly focused on a one rep max. They're testing those one rep maxes, and really you should be training a lot more than you're testing. And that addresses a little bit of what Teddy's talking about. But I do think that when you're testing your upper limits of strength, honestly, 20s ain't gonna get you there. 15s ain't gonna get you there. 10s ain't gonna get you there. You kind of got to go to threes, twos, and ones at least for a while. You've got to start, kind of pushing what your upper limits are. And what you'll find is you'll get really hungry. You'll get really stressed. It might affect your sleep. I mean, when you start testing those real one rep maxes, I'm not talking about one rep maxes, in the gym. I'm talking about, one rep maxes on the platform that you've trained for a long period of time. People ask me, well, how'd you get your deadlift up so high so quickly? Well, I deadlifted a lot. I deadlifted at least 2 times a week, at that time. So if I wanted my bench to go up, what would I do? I would bench 2 or 3 times a week. If I wanted my squat to go up, I'd bench. I'd squat 2 or 3 times a week. That's, I know we kind of are in this era of people think broad work capacity and things of that nature. Look, I work with enough games athletes to know when they want to get stronger, the way they do it is to get specific. Does that mean that that's the only thing they do? No. But when they want to get specific, or when they want to get stronger, they get specific and they do that more. So that's something to keep in mind. Holy cow, Samantha's got a long question here. Samantha's saying, I meal prep on Sundays for the week, mostly lunch, dinner, and snacks. New to this program, still trying to figure out my macros. Gluten intolerant. If I plan out my meals and snacks and then I see I have remaining macros to fill in the day, where can I look for good snack ideas to fill in my remaining macros? I work out at night, right before dinner, but it is late at night. In terms of filling in the gaps, usually what I'm looking for in those types of scenarios are energy dense snacks. Like, as an example, I wouldn't even really kind of consider, for instance, I know what I'm eating tomorrow, right? And so if I wanted to make an adjustment to how I eat, or you know my wife struggles with this a lot, right? She struggles with getting in an adequate amount of carbohydrates on her workout days. And so what I've told her to do is just add in some Vitargo, which is a drinkable carbohydrate. April mentioned having some a cereal that might be you know, respectful of your gluten intolerance, and then um, you know, having that before bed. But that, you know, I think filling in your macros with things that you enjoy is what this should look like. You know, any thoughts on that question, April?
I agree. Just generally, with in regards to snacks, it's generally about things that you enjoy. I do the cereal, or a lot of times I actually meant to mention you earlier, Paul, the night that I've been having.
Shoot, April's been having a lot of internet trouble lately, so um, we may or may not get her back. Chris was
Like
at.
30 calories, and then I fall right back asleep. It's the did I
We
fall?
lost we lost you for a second there, but you're back.
Okay. I was basically a lot of times I'll use like the rice crackers or the
Yeah.
cereal, or even like a fruit bar, like a dark cherry. It's like an all fruit bar or something like that, or fruit sorbet.
Yeah, like Bucha, you know, this synergy. You know, if you have 60 calories, this is a great, you know, a great thing to add. It's very filling, and so I like having it. And so those, you know, what she's asking is actually sort of the secret to all of this, right? Is to have those little quick hitting. I mean, the other thing is obviously bars. You know, though, like something like a Quest bar, as an example, is like 200 calories. So, you know, that might not fit exactly what she's talking about, where you're like, you know, 60 to 100. But there's no reason why you can't cut a bar in half. You know, so if it's 100 calories, just cut it in half, you know, and then have the other half at another point. But you know, I don't know about you guys, but man, I find those bars really filling and definitely can bridge a gap. And if, as an example, I was feeling a little hungry before bed, had 100 calories left, that would be a good fit, you know, for me at least. Um,
And I think that it will be good like during the time while you're cutting body fat, because those two have very high fiber levels. Like the fiber levels are super high. So I generally recommend for someone who's eating, who's not focused on dropping body fat, to kind of limit those, kind of like the brown rice on your rest days. But when you're cutting body fat, or you're going through a short period of dieting, the Quest bars actually can be very handy.
right, super. That's something to think about. Honestly, I hadn't considered that all that much. Um, Chris is asking, which is more important when planning meals, getting enough macros and going over on calories, or being right on, or maybe not hitting your protein target? With work, there are days that I'm at the mercy of the food available, and I've been in this situation. Great point. Honestly, don't stress out about it. It's not that big of a deal, especially if you're not cutting, you know. Which, once again, you shouldn't be the majority of the time. The majority of the time, you should be trying to meet your total daily energy expenditure, and you should be getting in good workouts and improving and building lean mass as a result. So I would not overly sweat that. That said, if you were looking for a specific result, I would start bringing my food. you know, um, you see it, you know, in the bodybuilding world all the time. You know, it's almost overdone, really. You know, where, you know, guys will go to a party and they've got, you know, 3 Tupperware containers, and like, don't be that guy. You know, but going to work with, like, you know, a couple Tupperware containers for 7 to 8 weeks. I mean, you know, that might just be the price you have to pay to be a little bit more prepared. I don't know if that helps what you're saying or not, but um, you know, but I mean, I'll freely admit to you, like, I don't even think about it at all unless I'm in one of these cycles. You know, I've said it many other times before. Before I went up to the 181 for powerlifting, I sat at 165 for like 3 or 4 years. You know, your body just sort of wants to stay at these kind of set points. You know, and I mean, I would joke all the time, like I haven't had a controlled day in 2 years. Um, it just, the amount of work you do, the amount of food you eat, you sort of get into these routines. And I think just being more cognizant of it. I know for a fact, I mean, one thing we always hear when people start tracking their food is that just the point of tracking their food. I had a woman say to me this week, she's like, I don't know why this is working, but just me tracking my food, I've lost 3.5 pounds. And what she's really saying is, I didn't know how much I was eating. I was probably overeating as a result, and so the tracking has got me more in line, and that's a good thing. You know, so if you have a follow-up to that, Chris, let me know. Um, I do think that it's smart to have, I mean, I'm overly reliant on it. I will tell you it's my crutch, but, I use Chipotle a lot in these scenarios that you're talking about because I do kind of know what the macros are. Um, Even though the macros can vary depending on whether or not you have an MVP scooper or not. Um, Aaron is asking, when you're talking about carbs before bed, do you mean something like cereal, rice, or do you mean fruit, veggie? Excuse me if I sound stupid, just new and coming from paleo. Well, in the case of my fruit smoothie, I'm talking about fruit. But I do think that if you're coming from an under-eating background, what you'll find is that the cereal will end up working better for you. Because it'll allow you to have some more energy density, and it will allow you to sleep a little bit better. Um, like I said, I think I probably would be getting. It'll be interesting. I should probably try that to have cereal. I mean, the macros aren't actually that different from the smoothie that I have compared to having something like cereal with rice checks or something like that with coconut milk. So I might try it just to see if there's a difference. But I think ultimately what's happening in my scenario is that just the calories are lower, and so my body's kind of getting rid of that that excess water. Let's see.
If you use the plain rice checks, you actually the serving size is like 1 cup for 100 calories. So you can literally have like a giant, or you could either have the best of both worlds and only have a fourth of the smoothie and then still have a giant bowl of cereal too. You know, just a
Yeah.
thought.
I have to say, like, I find, I mean, like, I talked about it a little bit on my wall. I mean, anybody, if you want to friend me, you can go ahead and friend me. But I talk about stupid shit. It's not like Eat to Perform where we're trying to get out information to people. Um, but like today, I talked about having the oatmeal with protein. I love that stuff. I mean, I probably have it 2-3 days a week, and it's a great fit for me, and allows me to kind of get to my macros. So I think that having some of these things, the coconut milk smoothie. The other thing that is sort of a crutch thing for me. You mentioned it is balsamic and ranch dressing, and then also Frank's with ranch dressing. Those are some go-tos for having a little bit of flavor, but also getting enough volume in to kind of mix your salad. Let's see. We only had two more. Samantha saying, should I be focused more on calories or macros? Well, sounds like you're probably new. Calories are macros when they're added up. What we're trying to do is get you to eat macros in a sufficient amount, especially as it relates to protein and carbohydrates. Fats are the ones that you can sort of play with depending on what your goals are. But once again, if your goals are fat loss and you're constantly going subtraction, 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 you're going to find that you're going to run up against a wall. And so what we try to get people to do is sort of, go from that subtraction, subtraction for short periods of time, and then kind of move back up, maintain that for a while, build that lean mass, and then kind of reevaluate their goals as they go. One thing that people find though is when they start Eat to Reform, their mentality starts to change a little bit. This focus on constantly fat loss, because they start to see, wait a second, I control this, and once you can control it, then you go, well, is it more important for me to train for the Tough Mudder, or is it more important for me to be down 5 pounds? And believe it or not, a lot of people have said train for the Tough Mudder, which is perfectly fine. And so after the Tough Mudder, maybe then they go for the 5 pounds. So that's how we sort of suggest things. And actually, we do it for moms and dads, but we also do it for CrossFitters and Olympians. So and it kind of works the same. I mean, everyone wants to think that they're vastly different, but the reality is it's just always kind of a scale. You're either super athlete and you have tons of calories, or you're moderate athlete and you have an adequate amount of calories. So it's just depending on the individual, but you're not vastly different from someone that is working out a little bit more extremely. Teddy's going to be the last question. Yes, I see what you're saying because you're doing more work in the same rounds, but let's say if someone is hovering around the same body weight or slowly gaining, but has slowly been able to add 30 pounds to one or two of their lifts, would that also be considered an increase in work capacity or not so much? It certainly is an increase in work capacity, but I can tell you that a lot of people think, I hear this all the time, it does not show up in body fat tests. They go, I've gained 30 pounds, clearly I've gained some muscle. Not only would you not have gained muscle in that scenario in every single scenario, sometimes you could lose muscle in that scenario. Okay? And let me explain to you why. The way that you get stronger is adapting your central nervous system to the stress that you're putting on it. Not to mention the fact that your form might be getting a little bit better. You might be grooving your squat better. You might be grooving your bench press better. A lot of people think that they're working at their maximum capacity all the time, and in something like CrossFit, as an example, you almost certainly are not. I was doing deadlifts at 225 pounds the other night. It's like nothing to me. I mean, for somebody that can deadlift 500 pounds, 225 pounds is nothing. So I don't need to use every single muscle that I would need to use for 475 pounds, right? And so a lot of people think that they've maxed out their strength when in fact they have not maxed out their strength. So while yes, you've added work capacity when you've added more pounds, when I talk about work capacity, typically I'm talking about reps multiplied by weight. Dave Delanave has done some writing on this, and I've kind of liked a lot of what he says, because one of the things he talks about is PRing all the time, and I'm sure you can Google that, but it's sort of viewing every workout sort of differently depending on the goal. So on that note, I'm going to end the class. I appreciate everybody here. This was actually a really awesome questions and everything, you guys. So, if you need any follow-ups at all, April can answer those in the forums, and obviously we have a team of people that do that for you guys. So I appreciate everybody being here, and we need to get April to bed because she's clearly very sleepy. Talk to you later.
Good night.